super excited to be doing this. Although I will be honest with you, I am a little bit disappointed that I can't be with you guys physically, but this is the best we can do. 2 months ago, those of you in New York will recall that I was hosting a cereal box reading here in Brooklyn, less than 10 minutes walk from where I am right now. But now we're all in our plague bunkers. And in some ways, this is a great advantage to me because, and to all of us, because we can get somebody who wouldn't physically be able to be here, and that is to say, Martha Wells. We are still working out some technical bugs, but I think she will be able to be joining us shortly. But in the meantime, I am going to be shucking and jiving, so to speak, or speaking until she is able to join us. Let me just start by saying that I am a huge fan of Martha Wells, all the way from the beginning, from her very, very, very first novel, which is to say Element of Fire. And if you haven't read this book, you really, really should. This is like a great swashbuckling novel that is super, super duper thrilling. And then, or after that, a few years after that, I was privileged to read The Death of the Necromancer, which is the sort of follow-up to Element of Fire in manuscript. And that was gaslamp fantasy, folks, before anybody was even calling it gaslamp fantasy. And that was, it's just a great book. It's got magic, it's got trains, it's got sorcerers, it's got necromancy, it's got ghouls rising from the plaza and reaching out to grab you. It's got magical, technical balls, which give you extra powers. It's got mediums. It's so super. Anyway, and then she wrote another trilogy set in the same universe in a sort of World War I thing, which was super duper cool. And then after that, she wrote the Roxura books, and then she switched to science fiction and started writing the Murderbot novellas, which I know that all of you have read the first 4 and are thrilled for this first full-length novel. So while we wait for Martha Wells to join us and to read, I will also talk a little bit about the New York Review of Science Fiction Reading Series, which is produced by Jim Freund, who is working the tech tonight. And he is also supported by Barbara Krasnoff, who is the best. And if we were physically in Brooklyn Commons, where we usually have the series, she would probably be taking the gate, but she always provides support in all kinds of other ways. So I'm grateful to them both. And of course, I am grateful to Melissa Ennin, who has been physically hosting the series for the past several years, and it's a great space, and I hope we'll get to be back there. While we are away, we will continue to try and provide virtual events, and ideally we'll shift back to physical events. And of course, in order to do that, donations are helpful. We will never charge anybody to come to any of our events, but we do ask that we get your support when we can. So if you wouldn't mind donating to Jim Freund's Patreon page, which I believe is in the event link, and if you can't find it now, you can search on Patreon for Jim Freund, that's Freund, and donate whatever you can. That would be super duper cool. Let's see, what else? As part of this evening's event, we will be doing a giveaway of 5 books. Oh, here we are, sorry. As part of this event, we will be doing a giveaway of 5 copies of Martha Wells' new book, Network Effect. And in order to enter this giveaway, we will ask you to click on the link in the event page, which will take you to a Google Forms page, which will remain open all evening. Tomorrow, Jim. and choose 5 winners who will be contacted by email, and physical copies of the book will be mailed to you. Okay, so let me just see where we are in terms of getting Martha to join. Bear with me a bit.
We just sent her the link.
Okay. Okay, she is going to be joining imminently. She is just off another virtual book event with John Scalzi, who I'm sure is much more charming than I am. But I would also say, by the way, if you haven't picked up a copy of his most recent book, The Last Emperor, which I know it looks like it's spelled Emperox. Apparently you can pronounce it both ways if you like Empero because it's gender neutral, whatever. So I also advise that. It's a really, really, really great book. What else can I say? Oh, yes. Since I can get to chat until we start this out, I know there's also another competing event this evening because it's also the book launch day of Carlos Hernandez's second Sal and Gabby book, Sal and Gabby Fix the Universe. And if you haven't had a chance to read Sal and Gabby Break the Universe, I, again, absolutely endorse that you do so. Carlos is an absolute delight. Plus, the book just teaches you all kinds of useful Cuban Spanish slang, which I'm sure we all need to know, and also some useful fake curse words in English because, really, if you want to call somebody an idiot, calling them a sandwich is a super duper thing to do. So, I'm sorry that Carlos and his lovely wife, Claire Cooney, could not be here at this event, but of course, I support them in their competing event. Don't dump us to go there. Please stay here. And I believe that Martha will be joining us very briefly. Let's see, what else? Yeah, she is in the midst of trying to do so. Please be patient with us. This is a new software. And again, if you will donate to Jim's Patreon page, that will help to provide us with software so that we can continue to provide great video events. I can't really talk about June just yet, but please do mark out your calendars for the first Tuesday in June because we will be doing another event, which I'm sure will be fabulous, even if we're not entirely sure what it is yet, but it will be awesome because that's what it's
Latinx Rising event, but those are both New Yorkers. We may postpone that for a bit so we can go for farther people.
We're planning on doing, actually, is we want to continue to take advantage of the fact that we are able to contact anybody and have events from anywhere. Usually we get New York-based writers or people who are close by or people who are in for events. But now we can go across the country or across the world. And it looks like Martha is going to be joining us shortly. There she is.
Hi.
I believe, yeah, Jim, do we have her? Okay, good, fine. I am going to do the official bio of Martha, and then she's going to, and you can stop, which I'm sure will give you all joy. The Wells has 50 novels, including The Wizard Hunters, The Wheel of the Infant, The Books of the Roxura series, which begins with The Cloud Roads and ends with The Harbors of the Sun, and the Nebula nominated The Death of the Necromancer. Again, so awesome. As well as YA fantasy novels, short stories, and nonfiction. Ladies, gentlemen, and NBs, and people of all genders, species, the Wells.
Hi. Thank you for having me. I'm just going to go ahead and do the reading. I'm sorry it took me a little bit to get in here. I realized I had to switch browsers, and that was the problem. I'm going to do a reading from Network Effect, fairly short, under 20 minutes, I believe. This is from Chapter 2 of Network Effect, and it's not particularly spoilery. It's very early on in the book. It's Help Me.File, Excerpt 1, file detached from main narrative. Since I decided to stay temporarily on Preservation Station Dr. Mensah had asked me to go places with her 7 times. 6 of those times were just relatively short, boring meetings on ships in orbit or in dock. The 7th was when she had asked me to go down to the local planet's surface with her. I don't like planets, but she lured me there by explaining that it was for an art festival, conference, religious observation that would include a lot of live performances. After checking to find out the definition of a lot of was 87 plus, I agreed to go. Some live performances were demonstrations or seminars I wasn't interested in, but I managed to fit in 32 plays and musicals while Mensah was in meetings or doing things with her family members. I used drones to record the performances that were overlapping or scheduled against each other. They were all being recorded for the local planetary entertainment feed, and the popular ones would be reconfigured as video productions, but I wanted to see all the versions. One evening, a play was interrupted when Mensah tapped my feed and asked me to please come get her. The request was so abrupt and out of character, I replied with the code phrase we had come up with in case she was being held against her will.
Okay.
She said she was just tired. That was even more out of character. I mean, I could see she got tired. She just hated to admit it. I left the drone to record the rest of the play and slipped out of the theater. It was night and the crowd in the street was beginning to thin out, but the big open pavilion across the plaza where the party was being held was still bright and noisy. If you had to be in a crowd of humans, the crowds at this festival weren't bad, since they were the distracted kind, where all the humans and augmented humans are talking to each other or on comm or feed or hurrying to get places. The downside was a lot of humans were waving sticks with lighted objects or spark-emitting toys, or tossing colored powders that propped and emitted light. I have no idea. But whatever, with all that going on, nobody noticed me.
Yes.
Plus, it was preservation and there were no scanning drones, no armed human security, just some on-call human medics with bot assistants and rangers who mainly enforced environmental regulations and yelled at humans and augmented humans to get out of the way of the ground vehicles. In the pavilion, I located Mensah near the edge of the crowd talking to Thiago and Farai, who was one of her marital partners. I stopped next to Mensah and she grabbed my hand. Right, it's usually a good idea to warn bot human constructs who call themselves Murderbot before making grabby hands, except during a security incident when you would need the human you're trying to extract from lethal circumstances to grab you and hold on. And this read as the latter, like Mensah needed me to save her. So I didn't react except to shift closer to her. Thiago was saying, I don't know why you can't just talk to us. I heard him clearly since I was looping my ambient audio to lower the level of the music from blaring down to a pleasant background soundtrack level. The glance Thiago threw at me was annoyed, like I had interrupted their conversation. Hey, she called me. And I have a job here. I get paid in hard currency cards and everything. I told you why, Mensah said, and she sounded normal, calm, and firm, except that was how she sounded when humans were trying to kill us. So, I had the whole pavilion covered by my drones, and weapons scan was negative. Weapons weren't even permitted on the planet except in designated wilderness areas where hostile fauna was a problem. Voices were loud, but my filters showed they were still well within the range of happy, intoxicated, interested emotional tones. But Mensah's grip on my hand told me how tense her arm muscles were. Situation assessment, I have no idea. Fry said, Thiago, no, she asked for space. You need to give that to her. She smiled at me politely. I never know how to react to that. She leaned into Mensah to kiss her and said, we'll see you at the house. Mensah nodded and turned, and I let her tow me out of the pavilion. We made it outside to the pedestrian plaza, and I asked her, do you need a medic? I thought she might be sick. If I was a human and I had to be in the pavilion with all those other humans for the past 2.5 hours, I'd be sick. No, she told me, still sounding calm and normal, I'm just tired. Excuse me. I sent a feed request to the ground vehicle, which on preservation was called a go-kart for some reason, some stupid reason, to meet us at the nearest transportation area. The plaza and streets were lit with little floating balloon lights, and the dirt and temporary paving painted with elaborate designs and light-up paint. Fortunately, it wasn't that marker paint that broadcast on the feed, which would have been a nightmare. As we walked through the crowd, people recognized Mensah and smiled and waved. Mensah smiled and waved back, but didn't let go of my hand. On the fringe near the transport area, an intoxicated human wandered toward us with a handful of glitter dust, but veered off when I made deliberate eye contact. Our vehicle was waiting for us, and I handed her in and climbed into the other seat. I told it to head for the family camp house, which had been erected in a habitation area on the outskirts of the festival site. The vehicle had a limited bot driver, which would take the humans all over the campground and festival site, but knew not to go into the designated no-vehicle sections. It hummed out of the court and into the dark, along the path that led through high grass and scrub trees. Mensah sighed and opened the window. The breeze was still warm and smelled like vegetation, and the guide lights along the way were low enough not to obscure the starfield. All the humans and augmented humans staying here for the festival made it a heavily populated area, but we were traveling through the section reserved for humans who actually wanted to sleep. The temporary housing, pop-up shelters of all shapes and sizes, camping vehicles, tents and collapsible structures that looked more like art installations, were all mostly dark and quiet. The camp area for humans who had to be loud was on the far side of the grounds with a sound baffle field to deflect the music and crowd noise. She said, "Thank you. I'm sorry I interrupted your evening." I recalled my drones except for the one that was recording the play and the detachment I had designated to keep tabs on the family still at the party. Another detachment was at the camp house, maintaining a perimeter and keeping watch on the 2 adults and 7 children who had gone back earlier. I wasn't sure how to react. Mensa wasn't acting like I had rescued her from certain death, but she wasn't acting like we were heading back to the habitat after a boring but successful day collecting samples either. I said, "I recorded the plays. Do you want to see them?" She perked up. "I never get to see the performances at this thing. Did you get the one, what was it called? The New Historical by Gla and Jaimin?" The difference between common normal and actual normal was measurable enough that I could have made a chart. I just said, "Yes, it's pretty good." Something was bothering her, and it wasn't just their family was clearly as weirded out by me as I was by them. They had assumed I would stay in the camp house, which, no. Mensa had told them I didn't need any help or supervision and could find my own way around. Quote, "If it can infiltrate high-security corporate installations while people are shooting at it, it can certainly handle a domestic festival," unquote. It wasn't that her family was phobic about the scary rogue sec units the entertainment media and the feeds were so fond of, or that they didn't like bots. There were free bots wandering around on preservation that though they had guardians who were technically supposed to keep track of them. It was just me, the sec unit, they didn't like. That didn't apply to the 7 kids. I was illicitly trading downloads via the feed with 3 of them. I think if I'd been a normal bot, or even like a normal sec unit, just off inventory, naive and not knowing anything about how to get along in the human world or whatever, like the way humans would write it for the media, basically, it would have been okay. But I wasn't like that. I was me, Murderbot. So instead of Mensa having a pet bot like poor Mickey, or a sad bot human construct that needed someone to help it, she had me. I told this to Dr. Bradwatch later, because we talked about a lot of things while she was doing research about bot-human relations for her documentary. After thinking about it, she said, "I wish I thought you were wrong." Farai was a possible exception. Up on the station, when Mensa had first introduced me to her family, she'd had a conversation with me, or a conversation at me, you could say. Transcript. "Farai, you know we're grateful for how you returned her to us." I did know, I guess. What do humans say in this situation? A quick archive search came up with some variation on, "Okay, and even I knew that wasn't going to cut it." Just a heads up, when a Murderbot stands there looking to the left of your head to avoid eye contact, it's probably not thinking about killing you. It's probably frantically trying to come up with a reply to whatever you just said to it. She added, "I wanted to ask what your relationship to her is. In the Corporation Rim, Mensa was my owner. On Preservation, she was my guardian. That's like an owner, but preservation law requires they be nice to you. But Mensa and Pin Lee were trying to get my status listed as refugee working as employee security consultant. But I knew Farai knew all that, and I knew she was asking for an answer that was closer to objective reality. And wow, I did not have that answer. I said to her, "I'm her sec unit." Yes, that's still in the buffer. She lifted her brows. "And that means?" Backed into yet another conversational corner, I fell back on honesty. "I don't know. I wish I knew." She smiled. "Thank you." And that was that. Mensa's family were also weirded out by the idea that I would be providing security, and were afraid I would be, I don't know, scaring legitimate visitors and killing people, I guess. And granted, while I have been a key factor in certain clusterfucks of gigantic proportions, and my risk assessment module has serious issues, my threat assessment record is pretty great, like 93%. Most of the negative points came from that time I didn't know that Wilkin and Girth were hired killers until Wilkin tried to shoot Donna Bene in the head, but that was an outlier. Mensa's family also thought they didn't need security, which maybe before Grey Chris, that had been true. But as it was, during the festival, I only had to deal with 5 incursions, 4 by OutSystem newsfeed journalists with recording drones. I took control of the drones, I can always use a few more, and notified the local rangers who drove off the human journalists. The 5th incursion was the one that got me in trouble with Amina, Mensa's oldest offspring. Since the festival had started, I had been taking note of a potential hostile that Amina had been associating with. Evidence was mounting up, and my threat assessment was nearing critical, Things like, 1, he had informed her that his age was comparable to hers, which was just below the local standard for legal adult, but my physical scan and public record search indicated that he was approximately 12 preservation standard calendar years older. 2, he never approached her when any family members or verified friends were with her. 3, he stared at her secondary sexual characteristics when her attention was elsewhere. 4, he encouraged her to take intoxicants that he wasn't ingesting himself. Her parental and other related humans all assumed she was with her friends when she was seeing him, and her friends all assumed she was with family, and she hadn't told either group about him. 6, I just had a bad feeling about the little shit. You might think the obvious thing to do was to notify Mensa or Farai or Tano, the third marital partner. I didn't. If there was one thing I understood, it was the difference between proprietary and non-proprietary data. So on the night when potential target invited Amina to come back to his semi-isolated camp house with him to meet some friends, I decided to come along. He led her into the darkened house, and she stumbled on a low table. She giggled and he laughed. Sounding way more intoxicated than he actually was, he said, "Wait, I got it," and tapped the house's feed to turn on the lights. And I was standing in the middle of the room. He screamed. Yes, it was hilarious. Amina clapped a hand over her mouth, startled, then recognized me. She said, "What the hell? What are you doing here?" Potential target gasped. "What? Who?" Amina was furious. "That's my second mother's friend," she said through gritted teeth. "And her security person." "What?" He was confused. Then the word security penetrated. He stepped away from her. I guess you'd better go." Amina looked at him and then glared at me and then turned and stamped out the door and down the steps to the path. I followed her and he backed away as I passed him. "Yeah, you better." On the dirt path lit by the low floating guide lights, I caught up with her. Not so much intentionally, but my legs were longer and she was putting more energy into stamping her feet than gaining distance. She said, "How did you know where I was? What were you doing, hiding under the porch?" She thought I wouldn't get the domestic animal reference. I said, "Wow, that was rude, especially considering that I'm your second mother's," I made ironic quote marks, "friend. Is that how you talk to your bot servants?" My drone cam showed her expression turn startled and then a combination of sulky and guilty. "No, I don't have bot servants. I didn't know. I never heard you talk." "You didn't ask. Had I not been talking? I had been talking to the kids on the feed and to Mensa. Maybe with the rest of the family it had been easier to pretend to be a robot again." I added, "No one else approached that house. He lied about meeting other humans there." She stamped along in silence for 12.5 seconds. "Look, I'm sorry, but I'm not some kind of idiot, and I don't fuck around. If he'd done anything I didn't like, I was going to leave. And if he wouldn't let me leave, I have the feed. I can call for help whenever I want." She was scornful and way overconfident. She added, "I wasn't going to let him hurt me." I said, "If I thought he was going to hurt you, I'd be disposing of his body. I don't fuck around either." She stopped and stared up at me. I stopped but kept my gaze on the path ahead. I said, "Mensa is a planetary leader of a minor political entity that has managed to get the angry attention of major corporates. Her situation has changed. Your situation has changed. You need to grow up and deal with it." She took a breath to say something, stopped, and then shook her head. "He wasn't a corporate spy. He was just someone you don't know who showed up out of nowhere at a massive public festival attended by half the continent and whatever off-world humans happened to be wandering through. I knew he wasn't a corporate spy, see above disposing of bodies, but she sure didn't." She was quiet for 16 seconds. "Are you going to tell my parents about this?" Is that what she was worried about? I was insulted and exasperated. "I don't know. I guess you'll find out." She stamped away. So in retrospect, I could see that hadn't gone so well. Our vehicle rumbled through the dark, up the low hill to the camp house, which was a pop-up two-story structure with broad covered balconies off both levels. It had been placed near a couple of large trees with frilly leaves that curved over the roof. It had been built by Mensa's grandfather, while her grandmothers and other assorted family members had been working on the original planetary survey and terraforming. The colonists who hadn't been living in orbit on their ship had all stayed in temporary structures at that point, and were moved seasonally to avoid destructive weather patterns in the parts of the planet that had been habitable at the time. There were other pop-ups, large and small, planted all over the hills around us, the nearest 27 meters away. Lights were on inside the house, and one light floated above the beacon spot for the vehicles. I would have worried about the lack of lighting if I hadn't had 37 drones on patrol in the immediate area. Drones had picked up previously identified humans and augmented humans returning to the other houses or passing through the area. and I'd conducted safety checks on unidentified humans encountered for the first time. I was cataloging power signatures on some small mobility devices used by non-augmented humans for medical reasons. I hadn't seen these anywhere in the corporation rim, though maybe that was because I hadn't spent much time hanging out on planets with human populations not exclusively engaged in corporate slave labor. The entertainment media showed planets that weren't all corporate slave labor. I had just never been on one. The drones had also tracked the 5 younger kids on a completely illicit expedition to a nearby creek where they performed some kind of ritual that involved jumping out at each other from behind bushes and rocks. They returned to the house without being caught by the adult humans or older siblings and were now collapsed in their upstairs bunk room watching media. The house actually had secure sealable window and door hatches, which no one used, but at least this made it easy for my patrol drones. As the vehicle settled into its spot, Mensa said, "I'm just going to sit outside for a bit. Why don't you go back to the festival? There's a few more plays tonight, aren't there?" I try to avoid asking humans if there's anything wrong with them, mostly because I don't care. On the rare occasions when I did care, it would have meant starting a conversation not directly related to security protocol, and that was just a slippery slope waiting to happen for a variety of reasons. But humans ask each other about their current status all the time, so how hard could it be? It was a request for information, that was all. I did a quick search and pulled up a few examples from my media collection. None of the samples seemed like anything I'd ever voluntarily say, so before I could change my mind, I went with, "What's wrong?" She was surprised and gave me a sideways look. "Don't you start." So there was something wrong, and even the other humans had noticed. I said, "I have to know about any potential problems for an accurate threat assessment." She lifted a brow and opened the vehicle door. "You never mentioned that on our survey contract." I got out of the vehicle and followed her toward a group of chairs next to the house, scattered around in the grass under the trees. The shadow was deep, so I had to switch to a dark filter to see her. That was because I was half-assing my job. She took a seat. "If that was you half-assing your job, I don't want to see what you're like when..." The smile faded and she trailed off, then added, "But I suppose I did see when you were doing your best." I sat down too. Sitting down with a human like this would never not feel strange. Her expression wasn't upset, but it wasn't not upset either. But I could tell my smart-ass comment had taken us down an awkward conversational avenue where I hadn't wanted to go. I wished I was Art, who was good at this kind of thing. The thing being getting you to talk about what it wanted you to talk about, but also making you think about what it wanted you to talk about in different ways. I wasn't kidding when I said Art was an asshole. I said, "You didn't answer the question." She settled back in her chair. "You sound worried." "I am worried." I could feel my face making the expression whether I wanted it to or not. She let her breath out. "It's nothing. I've been having nightmares about being held prisoner on Tranrail in Haifa and, she made an impatient gesture. It's completely normal. It would be odd if I wasn't having nightmares. I hadn't seen much of the recovery phase of trauma. My job was to get the client to the med system before they died. It took care of all the messy aftermath, including the retrieve client protocol. But in the shows I watched, recovery was featured a lot. There was a trauma recovery program that Brad Wadge had used in the Station Medical Center, and the big hospital in the port city had one too. I wasn't the only one who thought Mensa should go get the trauma treatment. I was probably the only one who knew she hadn't. She hadn't exactly lied. It was more of a way of letting the other humans assume she had. But the treatment wasn't like a one-time thing with a med system. It took multiple long visits. I knew she had never made time for it in her schedule. I said, "Is that why you're afraid to go off station without me?" So there were two positions on whether the preservation planetary leader needed security. The first was the one 99% of the population shared, that she did not unless she went on a formal visit to somewhere like the Corporation Rim. And to a large extent, they were right. The crime stats on Preservation Station and the planet were pitifully low, and usually involved intoxicated-related property damage or disturbance and/or minor infractions of station cargo handling or planetary environmental regulations. Mensa had never needed on-station or on-planet security before this, except for the young Preservation Council trainee humans who followed her around and kept track of her appointments and handed her things occasionally. And they did not count as security. The other 1% was composed of me, Mensa's survey team, all the humans working in station security, and the members of the Preservation Council who had seen the Craig Chris assassins try to kill her. But that incident had been kept out of the news feeds, so hardly anyone thought Mensa needed a security consultant, let alone a sec unit. But Grey Chris was not doing so hot now due to their hired security service Palisade making an extremely bad decision to punch my ex-owner Bond Company in the operating funds by attacking one of its gunships. The company is paranoid and greedy and cheap, but also ruthless, methodical, and intensely violent when it thinks it's being threatened. Relations between the two corporates had deteriorated since what we call the gunship incident, with Greycrest's assets getting mysteriously destroyed a lot in supposedly random accidents, and its executives and employees getting blown up or found stuffed in containers way too small for intact adult humans, and so on. And once Greycrest had started to cease to exist, even my threat assessment had dropped drastically. But Mensa had still wanted me to continue to provide security. I thought she was humoring me and taking the opportunity to pay me in hard currency cards, which I would need when I left preservation, and giving me practice in being around humans in a setting where I was not categorized as a tool or a deadly weapon. Yeah, I assumed it was about me, but humans assume everything is about them too. It's not an uncommon problem, okay? But for a while now, I had been thinking it was about something else. Her mouth twisted a little and she looked away over the dark hills and fields toward the lighted windows of the other camp houses and tents. She said, I suppose it was obvious. I said, not obvious. Not to most of the humans anyway. I had a feeling that Farai and Tano knew, but weren't sure what to do about it. She shrugged a little. It's hardly surprising that I feel safer with you. It's also easier to be around people who understand what happened, what it's like to be in that situation. That's you and the rest of the survey team. She hesitated. Farai and Tano understand, but I haven't explained to my brother and sister and Thiago and the others why I can't just rely on them for emotional support about this, as usual. Her face turned grim. They don't understand what it's like to be under corporate authority. That I got. Humans in the Preservation Alliance didn't have to sign up for contract labor and get shipped off to mines or whatever for 80 to 90% of their lifespans. There was some strange system where they got all their food and shelter and education and medical for free, no matter what job they did. It had something to do with the giant colony ship that had brought them here, and a promise by the original crew to take care of everyone in perpetuity if they would just get on the damn thing and not die in the old colony. It was complicated, and when I watched their historical dramas, I tended to fast forward through the economics parts. Whatever, the humans seemed to like it. But she was right. These humans had no concept of what it was like to live under corporate authority, and they really didn't know what it was like to be the target of a corporate entity that wanted to kill you. I replayed my recording of Mensa talking to Thiago and Farai at the party. Mensa had been abducted from Port Free Commerce at a meeting for the relatives of the murdered survey members. Maybe the noisy party, where the other humans who would normally help her had been distracted, had just started to feel too similar. I said, you need to get the trauma treatment. Her voice sharpened. I will, but I have some things to finish first. She turned toward me. And I want you to go on that survey mission with Arata. They need you, and it's a wonderful opportunity for you. It was too dark for her to see my expression. I'm not sure what it was, but you could probably describe it as skeptical. Rathi says that's how I look most of the time. With that confident planetary leader, I am totally convincing you of this tone, she added. And you know Mina and Thiago are going too. I'll feel better if you're there to keep an eye on them. Uh-huh. What about you? She took a breath to say she'd be fine. I knew her well enough to know those exact words were about to come out, but then she hesitated. The drone I had watching her face increased magnification, its low light filter rendering her features in black and white. Her expression was intense and fierce, and she was biting her lower lip. She said, I hate feeling so weak. I just need to stop. I need to stop leaning on you. It's not fair to you. We need to be apart so I can stand on my own feet again. I didn't think she was wrong, but I still wasn't used to things that were unfair to me being a major point of consideration for humans. It also sounded vaguely like the breakup part of the romance scenes on the shows I watched, most of which I usually skimmed over. I said, it's not me, it's you. She huffed a laugh, and then I sort of blackmailed her. End helped me file excerpt 1. Okay.
I guess I got back on again.
Yes.
All right. Hi, Martha. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yes, now I can hear you good. Before it was there was a little bit of lag.
No, I know. Somebody mentioned incidentally before we start this that they hoped that we continue to do online events here. And I just wanted to say that even when we do live physical events, we always live stream them. So you can still do it. But I'm glad to have this opportunity to talk to you, Martha. And so much for doing this. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions, and then we're going to ask the audience can contribute through the chat, and then I will ask you those questions too.
That sounds great.
Anyway, so Murderbot, who is somebody who doesn't like to reveal their face, hates to be touched, and just wants to binge watch serials. How is it that you managed to create the perfect quarantine person? What's the inspiration there for Murderbot?
I don't really. I think it just came out of a lot of things I dealt with over the years with social anxiety and depression and anxiety and all the other problems I'd had, and also just I wrote it in 2016. I had a lot of anger and I needed an outlet for it, and I think everything just kind of came together. Plus, though I mostly wrote fantasy for most of my career, I've always loved science fiction and space opera, and I read a lot of it over the years or since I was a kid. And so I think it was just a conglomerate coming together of a lot of those different factors.
It's just so interesting to me because, everyone's posting their perfect fictional quarantine house. And it's like, which house would you want to be into? And it's just like, Murderbot's the perfect person because they're self-contained, won't bother you, might probably share their meeting material, and will protect you if anybody tries to break in.
Yeah, you can do a lot worse.
So, actually, you kind of touched on the question that I was going to ask next, which is, this is, of course, my copy of your very first book, which I adore. And this is, my copy way back from 93, 94, something like that, which I love. And again, if people miss beginning the chat, you should read this. You should read Martha Wells's fantasy too. Element of Fire is so good. Death of the Necromancer is so good. And I have to go back and read all the Ruxera books because I know that I will love them too. I need to go do that. But what was it? What did it feel like to kind of make that shift from fantasy and to science fiction? What were the challenges?
It wasn't too different because I've always been a science fiction reader. I have done a couple of things. My media tie-ins that I did were Star Wars and Stargate Atlantis. They're both science fiction-y, it's kind of Stargate Atlantis is more, I guess, super science kind of stories, and Star Wars is basically, flat out space opera. So I wasn't unused to writing it. I just never really, I guess when I got the idea for the Murderbot story, it was obviously a science fiction story. It couldn't be fantasy. And I wanted to tell it as a science fiction story. So there wasn't much of a transition there.
Story is story, basically.
It was just, this is how it had to be told, basically, because I always kind of thought of it as in a science fiction setting from the very beginning when it was just an idea.
So I'm just curious because I'm always going back to my own peculiar prejudices as an audiobook reviewer. Have you had a chance to listen to the audiobooks at all? And
a little bit.
What do you think of Kevin Free?
I love the way he does it. I've listened a little bit, and I'm so glad they chose him.
I just, if anybody hasn't heard the audiobooks, this is the same person who is the scary DJ Kevin from Welcome to Night Vale, the votary of the Smiling God. And it's just amazing to me how he can shift persona and just is a totally different being as Murderbot, I think.
Well, when they picked him originally, I actually listened to some of his other science fiction or his other books that he's narrated, and so I was very happy with him as the choice.
That's great. So let's see. Does anybody have any questions that they would like me to communicate to Martha? Now is the time. I know there's about 40 people of us listening. So does anybody have any questions? Otherwise, we're just going to keep talking. Let's see. So I don't know. How's the virtual tour been going today?
So far, it's been great. I've done a few other events. It started out, I guess, not too long after the quarantine started. I did an hour talk with the Double Clicks that's on their YouTube channel. And they were doing basically a week of, they also did an interview with Becky Chambers and some other things. And so that was a lot of fun. And actually I think it was Saturday, I did and I've done a couple of podcasts and short talks too, little interviews. But on Saturday, did a video with, it's a new kind of program they're trying to do on Twitch TV, book streams with Fully Booked, I think is what we're calling it. But it's a Twitch streamer who interviews at least 3 authors. And I did one of those, and that was a lot of fun. We each did short readings and then talked for a while. And then I did, just before this, I did the talk with John Scalzi through Tubby and Coos bookstore in New Orleans. So the cool thing about the virtual tour is that I can do an event at a bookstore basically with John Scalzi in New Orleans, and then switch over to basically New York Review of SF. So that's kind of, I would not have been able to do that in real world space. So this is kind of fun.
Well, I guess I wish that you'd had the opportunity to have the physical book tour because,
I did too.
God knows you deserve it. I actually, there's a question on here that sort of, I think, feeds into my first question. And that's something I've been thinking about too, to sort of delve more deeply into the personality of Murderbot. A lot of people have compared their personality to someone with autism, or at least to somebody who isn't neurotypical, and somebody who is either like, queer or non-binary or asexual. And is that a deliberate representation, and how do you feel about that?
Parts of it are deliberate. Parts of it are just I'm not neurotypical, so this is just how I wrote the character. So yeah, I'm 55, 56, and when I was a kid, women weren't diagnosed with ADD or anything like that. They were just considered to be misbehaving. If your behavior was not did not continually conform. So I've never been diagnosed with autism or anything like that. The reactions to the character in the book have made me kind of, and I wonder about myself. And I was actually planning to go to the psychology department does a clinic at Texas A&M, and I was going to go see if I could talk to someone and see if I could get some more information kind of about things I had been living with for a long time. But of course the quarantine came right when I was planning to do that. So that kind of got put by the wayside.
So then essentially Murderbot is a sort of self-reflection for you in a lot of ways, like you were mentioning earlier. Yeah,
in a lot of ways. It's like every time I get really angry about something, I put it in the book. So whatever the Murderbot book I'm writing at the moment. So
there is a question about how happy are you with the covers?
I really love the covers.
I think Irene Gallo is actually on the chat.
Oh, really?
So
yeah. I love the covers. I remember very vividly, I didn't know what the cover for the first one was going to look like. And they did a teaser, Tor.com did a teaser of upcoming covers, which is little thin slivers. And one of them was, I think, the top of Murderbot's helmet with just a little bit of the ring of the planet. And I saw that and I went, oh, I bet that's mine. And so that was really exciting. And so I've especially loved the covers, and just especially All Systems Red. Someone actually I hadn't realized this, and someone had actually pointed it out to me. I can't remember who now to credit this with, but that the cover is what people see, what characters see of Murderbot from the outside, that very forbidding image. And as soon as you open the book, you're hit with what's inside. And so that cover actually works so well with the book. And I've just liked each one. I noticed, I was realizing that, Murderbot is actually in armor in all the covers. And I think that was actually because when they did the cover for Artificial Condition before they had the entire manuscript, because I'd just given them some sections like the description of what art looks like for the cover. And so Murderbot was shown in armor, with not realizing that it was going to leave the armor behind and it was going to be disguised as a human by that point. And so all the books have kind of followed that along by just showing Murderbot in armor, which I think is kind of neat too.
I think that sort of segues into another question about sort of distinguishing the difference between humans versus augmented humans. I mean, and to me, Murderbot isn't so much a bot as they are a cyborg. And I'm just sort of wondering about where, and the questioner is, I guess, too, about where those divisions are. And is Murderbot the only one who's really sort of concerned with those? And
yes,
so
actually. Murderbot is the only one who makes that division between humans and augmented humans. That's not a division most humans make because augments are so common in their society for, curing physical problems, diseases, all that kind of thing. They use augments. So, but the reason Murderbot separates out augmented humans is because augmented humans would have been a lot more likely to realize that it had hacked its governor module and that it was moving around in the systems that it shouldn't be moving around in. So it always kind of separated them out as a separate group to be more wary of, and that's why it does that.
So, I mean, would you say where's the sort of division between Murderbot and augmented human, other than the fact that Murderbot was enslaved by the corporation?
Well, that's kind of it, basically. It's, I saw this again. I think there was a review that mentioned that is why, how come a human with augments is a free agent, but a construct who just has, maybe as much humanity in them as much physically is just as physically human is enslaved. And it's like that's because the corporation has decided it. It's not fair.
I mean, I was just sort of thinking about, I don't know if you've ever watched Ghost in the Shell or something like that. And to me, there's just that whole, who's human, who's not human, what does it mean? And I feel like this kind of extends it farther in your work.
Yeah, that's what I was going for.
Let's see. Somebody would like to know, which scene did you have the most fun writing?
Oh, it's a different one for each book, but for Network Effect, there's a conversation between Murderbot and Art is probably my favorite. I had the most fun working on that. And and the other books, probably Artificial Condition, where Murderbot and Art meet and kind of get to know each other. That's, despite the initial hostility, that's another favorite.
Right. Here is a really important one in this time. A questioner asked, I've heard you say that Murderbot shows have parallels in our world. Can you share any of them? What should we be binging?
Rise and Fall of Sanctuary Moon is kind of, people think it's a soap opera, but it's actually more like a date or a nighttime drama. I kind of base it on How to Get Away with Murder, that kind of show, except in space on a colony world, where basically with lots of, kind of intrigue and machinations and people trying to protect themselves and protect their friends, and with all the stuff going on. That's kind of how I think of it. World Hoppers is kind of more of it like Stargate and Stargate Atlantis, this, adventures in far-flung space. And then there's one in Network Effect called Time Stream Defenders Orion, which is based on Legends of Tomorrow, kind of, a wacky, kind of go for broke kind of show where they do anything. There's one Murderbot references in Rogue Protocol, where it's a show where people were on a planet and then they were being attacked by raiders or something, and all these terrible things were happening. And that was kind of based a little bit on like a show that would be like Aliens or something, which was kind of setting up what happened later in the story.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great that you do that, because honestly, one of the most maddening things about reading a book where the people talk about watching a TV show is the fact that you can't actually watch the show.
Yeah. Especially when it sounds really good.
Yeah, that always drives me insane. So it's nice that you have parallels so that we can go and watch them if we need to.
Yeah, I was at a reading one time by Jessica Reisman, was reading one of her stories, which is, I think it's one of the ones that's in her collection. And it was describing this movie series that basically didn't exist. And it was so, I mean, the description was so vibrant that at the end, after she was done with the reading, we were saying, is that real? I mean, is that on the International Channel? And it's like, no, she made it up.
Yeah, which is why, more writers should be showrunners and stuff like that. Then everybody would have more money and we'd get the shows that we want to see.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Let's see. There's a question. Someone says, I was dying laughing at the function and program names that Murderbot uses sometimes. Are any of them derived from your own background in computing?
Yeah, basically, yeah. I have my day job quite a few years ago was working with software. I'm working with databases, writing programs, all that kind of thing. So yeah, it does. That is where I get it.
That's cool. Let's see. And somebody cuts right to the core. Are there going to be additional Murderbot books after Network Effect?
Probably. I can't really get more specific than that because the publisher hasn't announced it yet.
I guess you can't. I don't suppose you're ever going to go back to Ilria at some point, because that's where my own heart lies there.
It maybe. I mean, I hate to say never, because I have gone back to things. I did a short story that was a bit of a prequel to the Death of the Necromancer called Night at the Opera.
Yes, I've read it.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun writing that one. So, I hate to say never, but the ones where it's been such a long time, trying to get back into that mindset is kind of difficult. And I keep coming up with new ideas I want to pursue.
Because Nicholas Valliard, I have to say, is just one of my favorite characters, because you just never know what the hell he's going to do.
Yeah, you never know. Well, he's kind of hard to write because of that. I kind of think of the thing that I would do and then have to think, okay, now what would Nicholas do, which is probably something completely different. So always made it interesting.
Whereas I feel like Murderbot in certain ways is sort of predictable in the sense of, here's this being who just wants to be left alone, but in spite of themselves is just a good person and just has to help and protect people. And that after reluctance, they'll always do the right thing.
Yeah.
I think. Let's see. And somebody else was saying that Night of the Opera is great if people haven't read it yet, because I know that there was a collection of your short stories that I know I got in one of those story bundles. And I think I got specifically because those stories were in there.
Yeah, it's available in ebook.
Yeah. Let's see. All right. Does anybody have any other questions? Now is the time to speak up. I don't know. What hasn't someone asked you that you expected them to ask, or you wish that somebody would ask you at this point?
I'm not sure, because people have asked. I mean, people have asked quite a lot of questions.
But I mean, have we missed anything important, I guess? I mean, what did you expect us people to say that they haven't said?
I think that people have asked the right questions. It's always kind of interesting, because usually it's good when people ask an unusual question, because that does make you think about the story in a certain way. It's kind of like what I get out of workshopping is when the things that people got about your work or didn't get about your work, or the insights they had that you didn't really realize you'd put in there. That's one of the really interesting conversations you can have. But I'm trying to think. I don't think there's anything people haven't asked. Oh, there is one thing, and I think actually people have asked this before, is the reason Murderbot doesn't name the company, doesn't ever say the name of the company, and that's actually in Network Effect. So I kind of don't want to spoil that, but
yeah, you know what? I actually have wondered that, and I figured you had a reason.
Yeah.
Let's see. And somebody else does ask, and I guess it sort of dovetails to what you were sort of talking about before. Are there any other worlds you want to write about?
Oh yeah. I've been trying to start a new book during the quarantine, which I've discovered is not, the terrifying pandemic is not a great time to sit around and try to start a new book. So I haven't been getting a lot done. I can kind of come up with ideas, but trying to pull myself together to actually get stuff on the page has been kind of difficult. But yeah, there's a a new idea I'm working on, a couple of new ideas, and I have 50,000 words of a book that kind of died abruptly right at that point, that I've been trying for a long time to figure out how to fix it, and I just haven't been able to get in there and really. I think the problem is it's maybe 2 or 3 different books kind of jammed together, and it needs to be separated out. But yeah, there's plenty of other stuff I want to write. I just, finding the getting together to do it.
Right now.
Focus is hard. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're all finding that. I mean, maybe there are people who are in there writing the great American novel right now.
Yeah,
and
maybe.
More power to them, because I and I do QA, and that's hard enough to do, and that's other people's work.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Here is a wonderful question. Does Murderbot like the Great British Bake Off?
It probably would. It probably would, because it's kind of it's the kind of show that it normally wouldn't like reality shows, I think, because of the arguing and not being able to kind of stop the arguing or bullying. But the fact that Great British Baking Show is kind of soothing, watching people kind of be nice to each other and just try to worry about their, the things they're making. I think it would enjoy it a lot, actually.
Yeah, see, then Murderbot is just after my own spirit, because I can't stand the backstabbing stuff. The only version of MasterChef I like is the one with the kids, because the kids are all supporting each other.
Yes. The kid that somebody said, it's like, yes, they did come here to make friends, basically, and that's what's nice about the show. I mean, actually, I think I referenced the Great British Baking Show when there was I think it may be an Artificial Condition. There's a reference where Murderbot mentions it's got one of the shows it's got kind of backburnered is an art competition. And that's kind of what I was thinking about when I did that line.
But it's sort of interesting in the sense that Murderbot loves to watch other people making these connections in serials and having these rich emotional lies, but they're so afraid to actually claim something like that for themselves. They don't think they're worthy of such a thing.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of fear being treated as it's been treated. It's real hard to get over that. But that's why I think it really would enjoy these shows so much, is just watching the relationships and how, and just, people be friends and that would be very meaningful to it.
Okay, I think on that note, we are probably going to wrap up, because I am hearing from the producer that we should probably bring this to the close. And, at this point, it's dinner time where you are. I imagine you'd actually like to eat it.
Yeah. I've been in front of the computer for a long time tonight, so yeah.
I mean, that's pretty exhausting. So I really want to thank you for making part of your Murderbot Bookmas, your book launch day here with us. And I want to thank everybody on Facebook who's watching, and everybody who will be watching this feed later. Go buy Network Effect. Go buy all of Martha's books. And, please come back to the NYRSF series, because we're going to have more stuff coming up. We'll keep you all posted, and check out our previous live streams. I think that's pretty much all I have to say on that. And thank you so much to Jim Freund, who's the producer of this series, and to Barbara Krasnoff, who's also providing support behind the scenes. And, thanks to the universe.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I really enjoyed it.
Or
good. I'm glad you did.
and people could click on that. In order
Okay. Oh yes, there's a link in the Facebook group, I think, to buy the books, and I think there's probably an affiliate thing. And also, please contribute to the Patreon if you can, because that keeps the series going.
No, it's not to buy the books. Tor is giving.
Oh no, I'm sorry. Don't forget to fill in the Google Docs form so that you can get a copy of Network Effect. Join the giveaway.
Oh yeah, the giveaway.
So we will have updates on that tomorrow. So again, use the honor system and sign up for the books. And I think that I'm prepared to sign off. Producer, are we good?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Yay.
Okay.